You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, or indeed good evening. I'm Robert Bone and welcome to In the Chair, the podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world, and not just for Freemasons but also for anyone else interested in Freemasonry. Many thanks for tuning in and making it so far to episode 2. I really do appreciate it. Please share it with your friends, your colleagues, your brethren in the lodge, and if you are on Twitter and Facebook, please do let other people know about this. Hopefully it's going to be a great resource, not just for people who already are Masons, but for those looking to join Freemasonry, find out a bit more about it. Which leads us on to today. Today we've got an interview. I recorded an interview earlier with Martin Fulks. Martin Fulks is the General Manager at Lewis Masonic. You've probably heard of Lewis Masonic, especially if you're in the UK. They are a book publishers who specialise just in Masonic literature, Masonic books. Quite a few of their 300 titles are on the history of Masonry, the interpretation of the ritual. You have books as well, more practical side of things, maybe about lodge etiquette. And also the book that probably they're most famous for is, of course, those little blue books, those books that all us Freemasons have that have the ritual in there. So it was an interesting chat with Martin. It was only meant to last about 20 to 25 minutes. It ended up going on for almost double that. And the reason I've kept it all in is because it was interesting. I did consider editing it down a bit to make it a little bit more bite-sized. But on listening back, I'm sure you agree when you listen to it, there's some really good, interesting discussion going on. Not just about history, but also what Martin does at Lewis Masonic, the sort of books that they've got, and the future books, and not only the history of Lewis Masonic, but whereabouts they're going to be going in the future. So please do listen. I will also point out, if you're listening whilst you're maybe doing something, you could be doing the washing up or walking the dogs, or listening to this whilst you're driving or commuting into the office, or indeed going to a lodge meeting, and something crops up, something that you might find interesting. There are links on the website. You can get to that quite easily just by going to masonicpodcast.com/2. So that's the number 2 for episode 2, masonicpodcast.com/2. And on there is all the show notes, a summary of the discussion, as well as links. So if we discuss any books that you might be interested in, you can go directly onto that as well. So I'm going to cut off now, and I hope you enjoy the interview. I'll catch up with you again later. So here I am talking to Martin Fulks, the General Manager at Lewis Masonic. So many thanks, Martin. Thanks for joining me on the In the Chair Masonic podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, my name is Martin Fulks. I'm the General Manager of Lewis Masonic. Lewis Masonic is the oldest and most successful Masonic publishing company in the world.
I think pretty much anyone who is already a Mason definitely owns at least one book by Lewis Masonic, don't we?
Well, if you're a Mason in the UK, that is.
Oh, yes.
There are some people who, I get emails from people in America or Canada,
right,
who they see our range, and it's an amazing discovery for them. They didn't realise there was a specialist publisher like this, producing specifically Masonic titles in such a big range.
Yes. I mean, do you ever have any sort of problems when people start initially, almost the first thing that comes to mind when people think about Masonic publishing is, well, hang on a minute, isn't it all going to be secrets?
I think there are sometimes some confusion to do with different traditions in different countries.
Yes.
But as a general rule, I think Masons are very interested in learning. I mean, most rituals have an area where we take a dedication to a daily advancement in our Masonic knowledge.
Yes. So
most Masons have read quite a bit, and I think by the nature of the people who join Freemasonry, they tend to be people who are interested in light and learning and getting better.
Yeah.
So you get the odd occasion where someone doesn't quite understand about the difference between, in some countries they don't have ritual books.
Right. Okay.
So they have monitors, or it's just mouth to ear.
Right,
you
literally
learn from someone else.
the old-fashioned way, how it, I think used to be when it very first started, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they, when they first see the ritual books, it takes them a few moments to realise that this is for Masons.
Right.
It's not some kind of,
But obviously, the information needs to be out there for it to be passed on to people in the first place.
well, that's very interesting. You mentioned that. I think one of the reasons Lewis Masonic was actually founded was John Hogg in the 1800s. He saw people who were getting their Masonic ritual from exposés.
Right.
And because these exposés sometimes were fantastical, sometimes they were actually published by Masons themselves as a deliberate form of misinformation.
Okay.
So sometimes it had some very strange things in there, and he saw that starting to happen in Masonic lodges.
Right.
And he'd seen other people produce prototypes of ritual books.
Right.
And it was really to try to make sure that we kept our tradition rather than started copying people who perhaps actually were deliberately starting to put things in there.
Sure. I guess it's almost like, the modern way of things is you look at things, it's very easy to look at Wikipedia and for something incorrect to be on there, but by the time that gets quoted and referenced, before long, something, a spurious fact can get in. So I guess with something with a long history as Freemasonry, you really want to make sure those facts it's almost like a central sort of place to store those facts and ensure they are correct, aren't they?
Yes, and with ritual associations in charge of the different rituals and protecting those rituals, making sure that it's got the best possible commentary, and there's sometimes that there needs to update the ritual.
Yes.
Things like when the ritual penalties were taken out, then you can be assured with a ritual book you've got it absolutely correct.
Sure, it's the definitive version.
Yes. Interesting enough, history is repeating itself. Recently, we launched a website where you can download versions of ritual, and they're completely protected.
Right.
And but we did this because there's so many anti-Masons forwarding on different versions of ritual, and they'd add things in there deliberately, mischievously. But likewise, people had their own lodge ritual, so they'd type out some ritual, and then they'd add their own bits in there, and it gets circulated around. So we really found that there was a need for an official ritual. These rituals they're owned by the ritual associations, and there is an official version of the ritual. And we need to make sure that Masons can practice the genuine article.
Sure, and actually get as close to how it should be done in the first place. How it was meant to be without interpretation. But I guess still allow each lodge to have their own little workings and tweaks. I'm sure as Masons are listening to this, they might have been around and visited, and no matter where you go, everyone always seems to do it a little bit differently. But that bulk 99% of it's the same, isn't it?
Yes, some lodges do have their own traditions. A lot of them are actually trying to work as near to possible as they're trying to emulate the actual ritual association. And it's one of the fun things about going to different lodges is you can see different workings. You can see, and sometimes they can lead to insights. That's one of the things I like about it, because if something slightly different, you think, okay, I hadn't thought of it from that angle.
Yeah, that's definitely true, actually. I can think of a few experiences when, the things that sort of seem almost obvious or, almost repetitive in one thing, you go along, look at it from a different angle, and it all makes, it builds a different picture to things. And sometimes you see there's a little bit more behind the text as what you first see at first sight.
Actually, I think that is a very important part of the process of Freemasonry. So I think we have both being inspired by others, so that's what a lot of reading is about. You get really inspired. Learning the ritual, I actually do think it changes you. If you memorize a lot of this material, which is about leading a virtuous and a good life, I actually think it does change the way you think. It improves.
Well, definitely. I mean, I can attest that because next month, in about 5 weeks' time, I'm actually going to be going into the chair of my lodge. So I am currently spending a good 20 minutes, half hour a day going through it and learning it. And I've got to say, I know exactly what you mean by trying to learn it, not just learn it parrot fashion, but actually absorb. You need to really absorb what you're saying. It does put things in a new light, and you do look at things different ways, and you do pick those little subtleties up that are hidden away, which I guess it's those subtleties that could be lost if things aren't sort of curated properly.
I also think that process of working through different roles is character building. So there's not many situations in life where you start off with a very basic role and you're performing in front of people and learning and memorizing things. And then you end up in charge. And then you're not in charge anymore. So I think it teaches you humility, but it also teaches you to manage different positions. I think that's very interesting.
There's a whole range of skill sets that you pick up which you didn't even realise existed. And I don't think it's, and of course I'm still learning, and I'm sure in a couple of years' time, once I've been through the chair and sort of back to being on the side seats again, there's probably going to be more lessons that I don't even know exist yet that I'm going to be pleased. But I see, and I think other people do feel that it does, learning the ritual and going through it does change you in various ways.
Absolutely. I think a little bit about when I first went through the chair. I tend to be someone who prepares a lot.
Right.
So I tend to plan things a lot in advance, and obviously I have a love of reading. So my lodge is an emulation lodge.
Yes.
And there's a wonderful book by Graham Redmond called Emulation Working Today.
Okay, I haven't read that one.
Oh, yeah, so he's the senior member of the Emulation Lodge of Improvement, and one of the greatest ritualists I've ever seen, a silver matchbox holder.
Right.
And
just to explain the silver matchbox, that's a little award you get when you're pretty you can pretty much go through it. I think it's the second degree without fault, isn't it?
You've done all degrees, including installation, without needing a prompt, without hesitation, or without getting a word incorrect.
Crikey! So that's it's something to aim for, but it's obviously achievable if you put your mind to it.
Yeah. The Emulation Lodge of Improvement meets on Fridays at Freemasons Hall, and if you haven't visited, it's worth doing because excellence in different areas it's wonderful to see. And for me, I don't know if it's attainable unless I start putting an hour every day into Masonic Ritual. I find that I've got a choice. I can either do the ritual word perfect like a robot, or I can do it with some feeling and enjoy it. But some of the words change a bit.
Yes.
But I'd read that book, and I'd read this one called Masonic Etiquette Today, which is all the situations that are non-ritual.
I think I have got that one.
That's good because there's a lot of situations where there's some nice advice in that. Between those three books, the Book of Constitutions, the Emulation Working Today, and the Masonic Etiquette Today are what I'd recommend to someone going through the chair.
Yes, but of course, once someone's sort of been, going through the chair and getting a hang of their Freemasonry, of course, you don't just do the ritual books at Lewis Masonic. There's a lot more, isn't there? I mean, that's barely scratching the surface, I guess. Compared to what's on your bookshelves. So, that sort of gives a bit of an idea of how Lewis Masonic started. But how's it sort of bloomed into the business that it is today?
Well, actually, in the 70s, Lewis Masonic became part of a hobby publisher called Ian Allen Publishing.
Right.
Ian Allen actually sadly passed away this year.
Okay.
But he was a great man, and if anyone's into trains, they'll know about Ian Allen, and he really is the man that made train spotting.
Right. Yes, yeah. I've heard of him through that respect. Didn't know it was the same person, actually.
But nowadays, Lewis is very concerned about practical things. So we mostly focus on ritual books. We have handbooks for every single role in the Masonic Lodge. We have a software that allows you to download onto your computer, and you can go. It shows you all the routine for walking around the lodge, that kind of thing. But we also have books which are on the philosophical and deeper sort of considerations of Masonry.
Right.
And so we do cater for everyone, and it's expanding. So and doing very well. I think the standard of education in Freemasonry across the world is going up.
Right, which is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yes.
With these texts, I think they make a good balance to the practical experience. So, I was talking earlier that I like preparing for things.
Yes.
But obviously, there's no book that can prepare you for that feeling when you first stand up at the pedestal and you are the worshipful master.
Right.
So there's a sort of balance, and it's interesting. Your reading does tend to vary as to where you are.
Yeah, I think with Masonry as well, Freemasonry in general, it is although it's a big institution with hundreds of thousands of people, not just in the UK but around the world, but for everyone, they still have their own independent journey as well. So, everyone I think has their own experiences and draws their own elements from it. So I guess that's the thing, is it's not just like, right, here's the one way, this is how it is. It's different people draw out from it what they want, what they need from it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. What's interesting about that is that we can find people, if you and I went in on a search, we can find people who are absolutely convinced that Freemasonry comes from the Knights Templar.
Yes.
And we can find very well-educated historians which are sure we come from the trade guilds.
Right.
You can find people who believe we're from ancient Egypt, or we're from the Greek mysteries, or we're from Kabbalah, or from King Solomon's temple, or it's alchemical.
Right.
And I think Freemasonry acts like an ink blot test. People see what they want to see in this. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts our founding members left us was lack of information as to where we really came from.
Well, that's actually a really interesting. The way you actually class that as, interesting. You class that as one of the greatest gifts is the lack of information they've actually given us.
Yeah.
But now you've actually put it like that. That is actually a fantastic way to look at it. I mean, in a way, I guess people get the books to try to find these things out. And as you say, I mean, I've come across so many different theories, and if you're looking for the evidence to support your theory, you'll pretty much always find it.
Oh, absolutely. A worldview has its own inertia, and it also has its own momentum. So you can start thinking, this is it.
Yes.
For me, where we came from isn't as important as where we're going.
Right.
And I have a lot of conversations with people about this, and one of the most inspiring things that has ever been said to me is Brent Morris, who's a very impressive individual. He's the editor of the Scottish Rite Journal.
Right.
And resides in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
He said to me, well, Martin, I think it's exciting enough itself.
Right. Why try to look for more? Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone's saying, is this related to the art of memory? Is this a secret code pointing at something else? And I think, actually, it really made me think about it. We've got these set of different inspiring rituals which are designed specifically to bring around an inspirational change in your personality.
Yes.
Which has gone on to become the largest fraternity the world has ever seen. Wow, that's quite an amazing story itself. I mean,
yes.
So, yeah. So I think
the crazy thing is, it's meant to be a secret organisation as well, almost. Or that's what people sometimes, view it as, and just look at how large it is and how many people it encompasses and touches worldwide.
Well, I've been informed, and I actually do believe this because it comes from experts who specialise in that time period, that during the time that Freemasonry really got going, so if we look into the 1700s and you look at the language used in our rituals, so you actually take that and you date it by the language
and
by the ideas, the word secrets had a slightly different meaning then.
Okay.
So secrets meant things you shouldn't tell, but it also meant things you can't explain. So let's imagine this. It's impossible for us to fully express certain emotional or spiritual experiences.
Yes.
And at the time, the idea of using symbols to express things that you couldn't verbalize was quite common. It's not just in our society.
Okay.
We're getting closer to the secrets of Freemasonry. Partly were the meanings, which are beyond words, but the symbols express. So the
symbols represent they explain the things that can't be verbalized. It's I guess.
So if you look at the time, yes, they were discreet, but Masons very certainly weren't secret in the sense that people didn't know they existed. You see Hogarth does paintings of Masons. And,
yes.
They meet in taverns and go upstairs and paint the chalkboard, the floor, and things like that.
Well, they'd have big parades through town centres when new buildings were being built and those sort of things, wasn't it? It was I think quite something. I wouldn't say exactly people shouted about it, but they weren't. They didn't hide it away.
Yeah. A bit later on. I think also some of the stuff that has affected us was I think Masonry was very scared, and rightfully so, of prejudice. And I think Hitler really hated Freemasons.
Yes.
And he didn't deal with them very pleasantly in Germany or in France, and we're very concerned. So you can understand the need to be discreet.
Yes, that's sort of a bit paranoia, self-preservation, isn't it?
Yeah, but likewise, in the Proverbs of King Solomon, there's a lot of talk about the value of silence, and I think to some degree it keeps you genuine.
Yes.
So you're not doing things for show or for the appreciation of others. So if you do good works for the sake of them and actually just remain quiet. So I think that's where this sort of whole concept started to fall together, was some misunderstanding of the original goals.
Right. And with that, I guess some of the secrecy that was forced upon them during the war years as well, and it's pretty much led to to people's conceptions and maybe misconceptions today. Yeah,
so I also think with Freemasonry, we've got a bit of a hard situation whereby nobody wants, if you're trying to inspire someone with a story,
yes,
then giving them the punchline or letting them read it before the actual performance,
yes,
can really take something away from it. I think the only exception to that rule might be opera, where it's the only way you'll know what's going on. But most people don't want someone when they're just about to watch a film say, just to let you know, there's a few highlights about to happen.
Yeah,
you might find interesting. He dies, that happens. And so we do need to kind of keep what's going on there reasonably private.
It is actually,
spoil it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd be very disappointed if it went before I joined, if people told me what would happen, because it would, ruin the surprise. That is, say surprise, but you know what I mean? It's and I'm sure anyone who has actually gone through it themselves knows completely what I mean by that. It's an experience, I think. It's a unique experience that you have yourself. And if someone were to say, this is what we're going to do, you kind of go, well, don't tell me now. that's ruined it.
Yeah, absolutely. Never, ever read ahead. And with other orders. And we talk about the ink blot test, and I think that's another side to it. Is when I was younger,
right,
and I first got involved in Freemasonry, I had a very set idea of what Freemasonry should be, and I wanted everyone, or felt everyone should be very serious and very esoterically inclined. To me, it was, and it still is. That's where my Freemasonry is. But as time's gone on, I've realised that tolerance is an important thing, and there's some people that are in Masonry for the charitable and social aspects.
Right.
And I think that's very valuable too.
Yes.
And I think that balance keeps us balanced. So, if it was just social people who are interested in charity, we'd become a different kind of society, perhaps more like the Rotarians.
Right. I mean, we do have, we have that whole range of people who are members, and and I think if it just had one specific sort of person join, then it probably wouldn't be quite as enjoyable, really, would it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that balance of members, but needs to balance within us as well. So you interact with different people, and you can meet people who are very deep. They're almost, so Freemasonry to them is almost a mystical or philosophical pursuit. And you meet people who are very light-hearted, and I think those two people getting on are very good, and it keeps us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I mean, we have some people, and I from you just saying that, when your first description, I thought, yes, I'm thinking of someone in my lodge. You've nailed him on the head. And then when you said someone else, I thought, I know another chap. And to be honest, those people probably would never have met on the street. And if they did, if they were in the pub, they'd never talk to each other. But with Freemasonry in common, to be honest, they're sort of best friends, and they can chat away, and you have the whole spectrum in between. It's it is quite an amazing sort of thing like that, and how it's obviously built and developed over the years. You touched a little bit just now on the digital downloads of things, but you do have actually quite a few other ranges of products, and also the Square magazine as well, don't you, as Lewis Masonic puts out?
Yes. So if we talk about different types of Masons, and there are also different types of books. So if you went to Lewis Masonic's website, it's lewismasonic.co.uk, you'll see we've got books ranging. I talked about the handbooks and the constitutions, the ritual books, but we also have joke books. Okay. So there's very popular.
Good, useful for when you're having to make jokes. Yeah, obviously when you're going out visiting, or you have to make speeches at ladies' nights and things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's those are the people. That's what I was trying to say. Is you have just the ritual books and the history, but there's a lot more to it. And sometimes those are the skills that people also pick up that you don't imagine. Having to stand up in front of a group of people and do a toast, and maybe in 20 years' time, someone's got to stand up and do give their daughter away at a wedding. Suddenly, that skill set comes in quite useful. And the books like that. For those sort of things.
Well, likewise, we do have books on how to perform speeches. We have which are actually they're the templates of the speeches you might be asked to perform. Yes. It's not a rare thing in Masonry to be sitting there and someone say, "Could you give a response on behalf of the guest?" And you go, "What?"
I think we've got. That book in particular, I know I've got that because that fits. It's only a little small book. I think the one that I've got. So the chances are you've got a few on the bookshelf there. But I know one. I can't remember the author off the top of my head. But I know it just fits into your regalia case, and it's got all the things for if you have a certain visitor, how to propose the toast to that certain visitor.
Yes.
And whilst everyone's and I've had that before when everyone's all running around sweating, going, "Hang on, how do we do this?" You can just casually pull that out, have a quick little sneaky peek, and it even gives you a few structures for, as you say, the templates, outlines, and even a few good stories and jokes that are relevant to that sort of situation as well. So I know the one you're talking about there.
And there are a few approaches. So there's quite a few. There's quite a few different books on how to perform speeches. So again, we're talking about different types of Masons. A lot of people do like to start off with a joke. Yes. And so there's some, I could tell you some of them now, but there's some real, and they're all about Masonry. So they're play on words based, and some of them only Masons would even get. And some of them are more serious approaches. So let's say something really inspiring.
Right.
So these handbooks, we also have them for, let's imagine it's a Lord's meeting.
Right.
And the initiate can't make it. There's something comes up, or you don't have. There are ready to perform speeches that don't need rehearsal. So you can say, right, we're going to have a talk on the Knights Templar, and you just open the page, and you can just read out this easy to understand.
That's
talk on the Knights Templar.
Very useful to have. I didn't know that one existed. Is that would that be in the same handbook as I've got, or is there that's a different one, I assume?
That'd be a different one. I think the book you've got is actually for the festive board, but there's lots of different titles that do these things. So there's a good range. So you can kind of, if you could get one for if you're in the Knights Templar or if you're in chapter, there are different books that have ready-to-perform talks for those. There's quite a few on craft masonry. So yeah, it's a full range.
And they're all on the website as well, aren't they? And I think the website's had a bit of a facelift recently, hasn't it?
It has, yes. So it's a brand new website, and you'll see back issues of. You talk about the Square magazine. Yes. We have an independent quarterly magazine, which it's for the more serious Mason.
Right.
So there's a lot of magazines out there that people get free of charge, but most of them tend to be reporting on what's going on.
Yes. Okay.
Whereas this is actually starting to investigate things.
Right. Oh. Okay. And that's quarterly, and that can be you can subscribe to that through the website as well, the Lewis Masonic website.
You certainly can.
Excellent.
So that's worth a look.
So how many do you know off the top of your head how many titles Lewis Masonic actually put out?
Well, I know the range on the website approaching 300 different products.
Right.
And that includes DVDs, so we've got documentaries, we've got computer programs, right. So things like help you run being a secretary of a lodge, that kind of thing. There's obviously lots of issues of the Square, but they've got, so there's a big range. I think there's something for everyone. And indeed, I hope in the future you'll be kind enough to have some of our authors.
I hope so, because
the show.
Yeah, I've read a few of the Lewis Masonic books, and there's a few author names that do crop up. So it'd be fantastic if we can have a few of them on too. I mean, I guess today with Lewis Masonic covering 300 titles, you cover such a range of things. And the great thing I think about this subject is you can be really broad, paint it with a really broad brush, and then at the same time you can choose an area and just niche down and almost keep digging, and it's almost like a bottomless pit on this subject, and you can find the areas that interest you and really go into it. So that would be fantastic if we can have more conversations like this in the future.
Brilliant. And you'll find some of the authors they're far more eloquent and educated than me.
Right.
And the nice thing about that is we can have things on different subject areas.
That would be fantastic. Actually, out of this range of 300 or so publications you've got out, do you have any personal favourites yourself? And maybe for what particular reason you might have them?
Yes, I do. Published by Lewis, my favourite titles at the moment are there's a book called Studies in Traditional Freemasonry, which is by the Grand Master of Italy, Fabio Venti.
Okay.
And that, to me, is the greatest guide to overview of Freemasonry, both its history, its philosophy, its practice. It's an amazing book. It really is.
Is that quite a hefty tome?
It's actually not that big a book.
Right.
It's extremely well written, and for me, obviously after I've been working at Lewis Masonic for over a decade now, it was actually when I first read it, it was breathtaking. I really thought that the author had such a talent for explaining things.
Okay.
In addition to that, we have a lovely new title, which is The Rituals of the Illuminati.
Rituals? Okay, that sounds an interesting one.
Yes. So these are they are the actual rituals written by the original founder of the Illuminati when in the...
right.
So they were confiscated by the Nazis and ended up in the Russian archives where one of the authors found them a couple of years ago.
Right.
And they're actually in the hand of the founder himself and have been verified.
Right.
So we can actually see, so you go past all these myths and...
the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code sort of things.
Yeah. We can actually see what the truth is.
Right.
And that is... it's selling amazingly well.
Wow.
Because it's both hitting Masons who want to see... Because, they had some of their degrees did overlap with ours.
Right.
And, but unlike Freemasonry, the Illuminati had a rationalist agenda rather than a more spiritual one.
Right, okay.
So they were trying to create people beyond superstition, beyond, they wanted to have a I suppose they kind of
Right.
had a sort of Vulcan kind of view of things. It was going to be all logic and everything was going to be. So they're my two personal favourites at the moment.
Right. I'm sure it changes every time you read one. I mean, one of my favourite ones is the explanation of the tracing boards by I think Julian Rees. I mean, I've got to say, because that's maybe I'm a bit more of a visual one, but we all see the tracing boards all the time. And for those that don't know, the tracing boards are these pictures that do obviously have some symbolism on there, but you don't really notice it until you read about them. And I've got to say, that is beautifully produced. It's A4 sort of size, and it's got some really nice prints and different variations of the tracing boards in. And it's surprising, how the different crossovers and the things that is right in front of you all the time. And it's not until you read about it that someone that's researched it and cross-referenced it, just like the different versions of architecture that are used on the pillars. And then suddenly you're sat in the lodge one day, you're looking at the different columns around, and you go, yeah, crikey, they are all different.
Yes, I like those aha experiences, and sometimes they are, as you say, small areas when you think, I've been looking at this the wrong way.
Yes.
Another layer of meaning. I think that's one of the benefits of seeing the same thing again and again. And a book can do that for you. So that tracing board book you're talking about, so it is a beautiful book. It's one of two titles they've got on tracing boards.
Right.
And it'll show you what other lodges have on their boards. It'll show you what people do in other countries. But it'll also bring out some of the detail. And that keeps things fresh and exciting.
Yes.
And I think that's very good for people, and it's good for attendance. It's good for to keep yourself inspired, but it's also good for Freemasonry in general. Yeah,
and what I would do as well is on the show notes for this, you can go to the show notes by going to masonicpodcast.com, and it will take you to them. But we'll get the links so that if people go onto the show notes, any of those titles they can click, and it will go directly onto the website, so people can purchase them as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, that's fine, because I'm going to be clicking some of those links myself, so it makes sense to do it. Do you have any dream titles, any ones that you would like to see written, or possibly books that you've got in the pipeline that you might even be working on yourself?
Well, we've got some things in the pipeline, but if you're listening to this show and you are capable of writing one of these books, or feel inspired, that's the most important thing, feel inspired. My dream title would be the following. I've always wanted to do a book which is on how to run a happy and successful lodge.
Right.
So a guide to the different things you can do to keep the lodge working. So I've visited lodges where they do amazing things. They have a competition every meeting to see who can bring the guests from the furthest distance.
Oh, okay.
And things like that. There's certain principles of running a lodge that really work well, like making sure everyone has a job and that kind of thing. So there's a reason for them to be coming along.
Right.
If somebody could produce a title which is full of exciting ideas for Worship Master or for a lodge to deploy to increase its membership, to make sure that everyone enjoys their time there. And I think that's the key, enjoying their time. Then I'd love to see that book. And
to be honest, I'd love to see it in about 4 weeks' time, because I go into check on the 23rd of September. So I'm kind of thinking if someone could knock that one out quickly. If not, I'm going to be taking notes of my year and coming back to you in a year's time.
Yeah. Likewise, any books which are on excellence in Freemasonry. So I'd love to see a book which is for an almoner.
Okay.
And the almoner, it shows how to be the ideal almoner, or a guide to being a charity steward. And it's got lots of different ways you can make money as a charity steward.
The big part of Freemasonry is to do with the charity side of things, but I guess that's often quite overlooked when it comes to this side of it. When people start looking at books for the history, and I guess the running of the lodge, how to actually genuinely have a good time, and the charity side of it. It's a big, important, parts of it, but maybe not so well written about.
No, I agree. So anyway, anyone who could write those books, do get in touch. Likewise, any book ideas, I'm the person for you to contact.
Okay, and Martin, you've got all the details of how to contact Lewis Masonic are on the website as well, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. All emails will get to me.
So, okay, well, I think it sort of like wraps a few bits up about Lewis Masonic, and genuinely love to have you back again in the future, and hopefully some of the authors of some of your books, so we can go into a bit more detail and really explore some things further on as the podcasts go on. I was also just going to have a few quick fire questions, if that's okay, and more to do with you sort of personally, because not everyone we're going to have on the show is a Mason, but you are currently a Freemason yourself, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah, so just really quick, why did you join Freemasonry?
Well, you remember I said before I'm very esoterically and philosophically inclined Mason. It was actually me reading about it.
Okay.
I read about Freemasonry, I read about Rosicrucianism and Hermeticism, and I thought, wow, what an inspiring thing, this group of individuals who are here working to improve themselves and thus improve the world, to be a better person in the world. And I thought,
find out
that's the ultimate society. That's like the Jedi or some kind of secret group trying to help things subtly.
Because most people go the other way. Get into it first, get dragged into it almost by a father-in-law or something sometimes, and then find out about it. So you've come at it from the different angle. So that's interesting. But actually, it leads me on to the next question, which I think is one that people don't ask very much. But how come you decided to stay a Mason? Because I think that's one of the things important is retention. And I think it's one thing to get people to join Freemasonry. It's another thing to get them to stay, because you don't always know what it is until you join. But I guess you kind of answered that because you knew a little bit before you joined.
Yes, I mean, for me, Freemasonry takes the position of a very inspiring set of rituals and group of people. And I don't try to get more from it. I think you see some people who are trying to push things onto it. I think they're going to find the answer to the Philosopher's Stone or some way. And some people they're trying to get from Freemasonry what I think really they could get from a religion.
Right.
For me, it's an inspiration.
Okay.
So this is what we were talking about. I meet inspirational people. I think the rituals are inspirational. That's what the position it has in my life, and it never runs out for me. There's always something new or something exciting to learn, or a different way of looking at things. That's what I find.
Brilliant. And do you have any sort of a memorable experience, whether in lodge or anything relating to Freemasonry, or just something that stands out where you think, I wouldn't have had that experience if I wasn't in the Masons?
I think a lot of it is about who I've met.
Right.
Now, for me, the biggest lesson in Freemasonry was actually in my third degree.
Right.
And we have to be cautious about this because obviously some people listening to this may not have done that. But there's a lesson in there that makes you value time.
Yes, I know. Yes.
So you probably know what I'm talking about. And a lot of people, they function in the world they don't have a plan. They don't really know what they're trying to do here. They just move from one thing, which has emotional fulfillment, to another. And there's a bit of a wake-up call in that ceremony that makes you really value every moment.
Yes.
To every breath, every time you meet someone. And that really did change my life. That really improved how I was interacting with the world.
Yes.
So that wouldn't have happened without Freemasonry.
And that I know exactly the bit you mean, and I think, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening to this, nodding along. Actually, just really quick, just in a sentence or two final questions. Would you have any advice to anyone who's maybe thinking of, who isn't a Mason at the moment, but thinking of joining?
I think the most important thing, if you're thinking about joining, is to do some research and to talk to Masons you know.
Okay, so research not necessarily what it's about, but what's the general sort of, I guess, if you're the right sort of person for it. Yes,
I think I've seen it happen both ways. I've seen people who really would have benefited from Freemasonry. They don't have people around them that are supporting them in life and with their goals. They have people around them who are similar people who are trying to do the same thing, trying to help the world, trying to do good things. I think in Freemasonry we call it rendering ourselves more extensively serviceable to our fellow creatures.
Yes.
Which is a big way of phrasing saying, come on, let's help, let's just make things better. They could have, and they often join in their sort of in their retired people, and they say, I wish I'd done this earlier. I see that all the time. But I also see some people join, and they didn't really understand what it was. They thought it was going to be a business thing, and
Yes,
that they were going
a
to
networking
have people,
group.
a
Yes.
networking thing, and they get in there, and everyone's focused on morals and on trying to be good, better men, and it's sort of a little bit uncomfortable. So, and actually, I've seen some people get a bit upset. They did really think it was. They believed the bad press and didn't.
Right.
They thought it was sort of some kind of double talk, and when they got there, it was genuine.
Right. Okay.
There was no effortless income. There was no sudden jobs. So research, there's a lot of books which are designed for people. There's a great book called So You Want to Be a Freemason, published by Lewis Masonic,
Yes.
which tells you all about this. And actually go and talk to people. By the fruits of a tree, you will know it.
Right.
So by talking to Freemasons, see what their characters are like, see what they're doing in their life. And if that reflects what you're trying to emulate, what you're trying to do, it's time for you to ask about joining.
I mean, I sometimes think if you're interested in joining, then you're probably actually the right sort of person to join. If you kind of think almost like, that sounds like something I should be part of, then by default, it probably is.
It's worth noting as well that if you don't like Freemasonry, you don't have to remain a member. Conversely, Freemasonry will always help you and your family. The Masonic charities, I believe, have a once a Mason, always a Mason principle.
Right.
But, it's not like people think, I'm going to join, and then if I don't like it, I'm going to be, they won't ever let me leave or anything like that. No, it's an option to not carry on.
It's one of those things where you do have a bit of choice in it, so that's but fine. But I think, to be honest, Martin, I think we've really been chatting away, and I think we've probably chatted away more than what we'd planned to do, and at the same time, it feels as though we've barely been scratching on the surface of what we could have really been talking about here today.
Absolutely. Well, we've got some left for next time then. It's lovely talking to you.
That's exactly whereabouts I was leading to. But yeah, Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. So, for those that missed it at the beginning, it's been chatting to Martin Fawkes today, who's the general manager at Lewis Masonic, and the website for that is lewismasonic.co.uk. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. And of course, all the books, and of course, as I mentioned just now as well, in the show notes you can get to by going to masonicpodcast.co.uk. Go on to the relevant show notes there, and we'll be having links so that any of the books, if you've been driving along or you're listening to this whilst walking the dogs, you think that sounds like a good book, when you get back home you can pop on there and that will link you straight through. And whilst you're on the website, have a bit more of a dig around. Everything's all been categorised, and you really can there's a lot to learn out there. And Lewis Masonic is, I'd pretty much say, the one-stop shop really to find out a lot more about the Masonry and the history and basically how to be a good Mason.
How to make your daily advancement in Masonic knowledge.
That's the phrase. So you can spend one day a week listening to the Masonic podcast, and the other 6 you can be reading the books. Let me thank you once again for the time, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you very much. Lovely talking to you.
Many thanks once again to Martin Fawkes of Lewis Masonic. Many thanks for the time, and I'm sure you all got some information out of there. It was a very interesting chat, and I'm sure you all understand why I decided not to edit that down into smaller bite-sized chunks. There was definitely a lot of information covered, and I'm hoping that some of you definitely got a bit of information on there and learnt something perhaps that you didn't know before listening to it. So thank you once again to Martin. You can find Lewis Masonic at lewismasonic.co.uk, or go on to the In the Chair show notes. You can find them quite easily. Just go to masonicpodcast.com/2, as this is the second episode. So that's the number 2, masonicpodcast.com/2, and that gives a summary of the conversation I had with Martin, as well as giving you all the links you can click through to everything that we discussed. Whilst talking of clicking links, please go to masonicpodcast.com/iTunes, and if you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed. This makes sure that when the next episode comes out, it is automatically delivered into your iTunes account, and so you can listen to it whilst you're out and about on your iPhone, or you're doing all your bits and pieces around the house. And make sure you forward that link onto other people. You can do that via Facebook and Twitter as well. whilst you're on there, please do leave a review and a rating. Please bear in mind that, of course, this is only the second episode. We're still finding our feet here and we aim to improve it. On that note, if you do have any suggestions, please drop me an email. It's robert@masonicpodcast.com. If you've got any ideas for future episodes, future interviews, please do let me know, or any advice or tips. It is gratefully received. Of course, I'm doing this all independently and learning myself as I go along. So anything you can do will be greatly appreciated. Talking of Twitter, you can find on Twitter, it's twitter.com/Masonic podcast. Find me there and retweet it and share it to your brethren. And of course, not just to people who already are Freemasons, but maybe those who are interested in finding out more about Freemasonry and potentially joining. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. So thank you once again to Martin. It was really good to have a bit of a chat with him. I think we discussed plenty of things. Gives you a bit of a taste for some more things to come. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention, although I talked about iTunes, if you're an Android user, you can, of course, do the same on Stitcher. Just go to masonicpodcast.com/Stitcher, and that will take you to the relevant pages there. So, hope you have enjoyed it. Many thanks again to Martin for his time, and I will catch up with you again next week. I've been Robert Bone. Thank you for listening to In the Chair, the Masonic podcast. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter @Masonic Podcast.